Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Hope you're all doing well, and today I've got another selection of CDs to show you that I've been listening to recently, and these are ones that I've picked out of my collection rather than new finds, and most of these I've not actually listened to for quite a while. Okay, first up it's the Waterboys and The Secret Life of the Waterboys 81-85, and it's on the Ensign label. And this is a selection of unreleased studio recordings, BBC radio sessions, live tracks and B-sides. Highlights include an unreleased version of That Was the River, which features Tom Verlaine on lead guitar. There's a rearrangement of Don't Bang the Drum, recorded in one take for a BBC radio session with Mike Scott on piano and with an arrangement and accompaniment by trumpet, saxophone and violin. I also love a BBC radio session version of The 3-Day Man, and it's got a particularly unhinged guitar playing from Scott, and it's matched by his end of his tether vocals. Next up it's Uriah Heep and Look at Yourself, and this is on Castle Music. How the sleeve recreates the vinyl sleeve, right down to the inner sleeve as well. I think the album certainly rivals their contemporaries Deep Purple. The Hammond organ of Ken Hensley is high in the mix, and the heavy rock is interspersed with some prog rock, the most satisfying being a 10-minute plus track called July Morning. David Byron shows off his vocal range on this one, and guest musician Manfred Mann adds some Moog synthesizer. Next up it's Media Whores and Master of Pop Hits, and this was on the Screaming Apple label, and the album includes various 7-inch singles, comp appearances and unreleased songs as well. Leader Pat Dull, in my opinion, should have been a star. What you get is loads of 3-minute hook-laden scuzzy rock and roll songs, and the guitar riffs spring to mind 1960s Who, and the vocals sound like wasted Paul Westerberg. The knowing pop culture referencing lyrics are wonderful too, and should appeal to fans of the Dictators and the Hoodoo Gurus. Next up it's XTC and White Music on Virgin, and this was their debut album, and the band arrived fully formed, including the singles Statue of Liberty and This Is Pop. Radio's in Motion reminds me of early Ultravox, consummate musicians speeding up a song to try and make it appeal to a punk audience. Barry Andrews' organ is integral to XTC's early sound, and it's a bit of a pity really that he couldn't have stuck around for the long haul. The near 6-minute cover of All Along the Watchtower with a jerky reggae rhythm and dub breakdowns irritated me back in 1978, but now I can really appreciate the band's inventiveness. Do What You Do should appeal to Devo fans, and This Is Pop should really have been a hit single. Next up it's David Bowie and Pin Ups on EMI, and this was his 7th studio album, and it was released in 1973, and this was actually the first LP that I ever bought. It consists of cover versions of artists from the 60s that Bowie really admired, and See Emily Play on here was my introduction to Syd Barrett and Pink Floyd. Along with the Lenny Kaye curated Nuggets, Pin Ups was one of the first examples of an album looking back nostalgically to the history of pop music, and it was only 6 years since Pink Floyd's See Emily Play had come out, so the equivalent today would be an album of covers from 2015 to 2018. Bowie's vocals are uniformly strong. Highlights for me are Here Comes the Night and Sorrow. I also love his background vocals. Everything's All Right is a good example. Also Friday on My Mind and Sorrow. His saxophone adds a new dimension to some of the tracks. Sorrow and I Can't Explain, for example. And contemporary views at the time were nearly all negative, but looked back now in the context of his career trajectory, Pin Ups makes perfect sense to me. Next we have Around Grapefruit by Grapefruit on the Repertoire label, and their band name was suggested by John Lennon, and they were also signed to the Beatles' Apple Publishing Company. The vocal harmonies on this are their strong point. Three of the band had previously been in the Beach Boys influenced Tony Rivers and the Castaways. Vocalist and songwriter George Alexander was the older brother of Angus and Malcolm Young of AC/DC and George Young of the Easy Beats. And the baroque pop arrangement of Dear Delilah is a highlight here for me. Elsewhere you get some creative vocal arrangements and often tasteful use of strings and keyboards, which lifts the material above straightforward beat group fare. Almost inevitably influences from the Beatles will seep through. The lead vocals on Yesterday's Sunshine and This Little Man, for example, sound like Lennon. At their best, Grapefruit was certainly the equal of, say, The Marmalade, and maybe just below Badfinger. Next up, it's SICKO and You Can Feel the Love in This Room, and this was put out on the Empty label. They're Seattle pop-punk legends, and this was their debut album from back in 1994. The guitars have a similar sound to early Ramones, and plus there's more than a hint of bubblegum pop about their sound. And surprisingly, you get a perfect cover, in fact, of the Indigo Girls' Closer to Fine. And moving on, we come to Clouds by Joni Mitchell on Reprise. This was her second album, and it was released in 1969. Her vocals simply soar on the opening track, Tin Angel, and the poetic lyrics undermine the naive optimism of finding a new love, with suggestions that he is dark with darker moods and not a golden prince. That song about the Midway and the Gallery are apparently songs about a short-lived love affair with Leonard Cohen. Chelsea Morning and Both Sides Now are bona fide classics on an album which makes no missteps at all. Next up, we've got Big Audio and Higher Power on Columbia. And this was the seventh album by Big Audio, formerly Big Audio Dynamite, and it's from 1994. The spoken word found sounds were starting to be quite tired and dated, and I even thought so upon the release of this record. Mick Jones was, I think, starting to look for a more stripped back guitar-based sound, not dissimilar to his contributions to The Clash. Looking for a Song is one of the standouts on here. Jones passing on his knowledge on how to write a hit song, about 3 minutes 30 long, no complicated theme, it has to swing and have a melody with verbal range. My favourite track though is Modern Stone Age Blues, which drops the hip hop and found sounds, and the result is a song which could have easily have graced London Calling. Next, this one's a bit of an obscurity, the Cogs and Viva on Damaged Goods. They were a New York-based band, and this was their only album, and it came out in 1999. The female-fronted vocalist has New York attitude. David's Mother, which is about the son of the neighbourhood's whore, is a good place to start. Or maybe the mid-tempo Making the Grade, which certainly drifts into Muff's territory. Next, a classic debut album, Soft Cell Non-Stop Erotic Cabaret on Some Bizarre. And time has been kind to this album. It's not overproduced, so most tracks are just synthesizer and drum machine, and topped off with Mark Arman's emotive, soulful and slightly nasal vocals. The singles Tainted Love, Bedsitter and Say Hello, Wave Goodbye are all classics and were all top 5 hits here in the UK. Next, another one which is maybe a bit of an obscurity, the SpongeTones and Oh Yeah, and it's on the Black Vinyl label, which was the label set up by Shoes. And it's a 1991 album by a power pop band with a big debt owed to the Beatles. They avoid the trap though of falling into pastiche, as they are clearly talented writers of concise, uncomplicated pop songs. Brand New Start reminds me of the Dave Clark 5 Now Is Now has a good time, loving spoonful feel, and Infatuation and Return the Boy wouldn't have sounded out of place on Lennon's Double Fantasy album. Next up, it's a various artists compilation, and it's called What Does a Girl Do? Femme pop from the President Vaults, and it's on the President label. And this is a collection of US female pop artists from the early 60s, and includes a track by Shirley Elliston, who would later have some success as Shirley Ellis. But the rest of the names on here are totally unknown to me, and you get a mix of soul, teen pop and girl group sounds. Shangri-La's Sound-alikes, The Twilights, Doo-Wop Delights, Terry and the Tunisians and the Chelmars, and the Soulful Kittens are the ones I'm drawn to most. Next we've got the Pet Shop Boys and Very on Parlophone. And this is a band I've grown to really appreciate in recent years. They manage to be both witty and camp, and also deliver moments of melancholy pop which tug at your heartstrings, such as on To Speak Is a Sin. The orchestral arrangements on The Theatre are simply stunning, and the inspired cover of Village People's Go West takes the naive, wish-fulfillment lyrics to new levels of irony in the post-AIDS era. Okay, let me know what you've been listening to. I always love to read your comments, and I will see you again very soon, so take care.